Okay, mental illness. Given this month's recent events in Parkland, Florida, you may think I'm bringing up the subject of mental illness to underscore its influence on 19-year-old shooter Nikolas Cruz, who murdered 17 classmates of his former high school, but you would be wrong to think so. The American narrative surrounding these violent offenders is often marred by misinformation and misgivings about people often demonized in both popular culture and in mainstream news. Many lament the so-called disturbed nature of these shooters while choosing to ignore previous aggressions that went reported but overall unpunished. At this crucial juncture in our nation's history, our portrayal of school shootings has been shifting its focus to its most accurate cause, a political climate obsessed with violence and its preservation. In the weeks following the Columbine tragedy, information about the shooters was often contradictory, exaggerated, or flat out incorrect. The general public came to understand seniors Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold to be misunderstood bullying victims who finally snapped and got violent revenge against an oppressive social hierarchy, which is not the case. Even today, that is general consensus on what led the two teenagers to murder 13 of their teachers and classmates, yet the public broadly ignored their history with aggressive behavior, as reported in Dave Cohen's 2009 book titled Columbine About the Massacre. The two had in fact been planning their attack for over a year. They had been caught making and owning pipe bombs and stealing equipment from an electrician's van. They too had websites riddled with violent imagery and language, including a hit list of those they intended to harm. In the same vein, Parkland shooter Nikolas Cruz had been reported to the FBI multiple times for threats of violence. This is a screenshot of a YouTube comment made by Cruz in September of last year. In addition to this, his social media was filled with images of himself holding weapons, including the AR-15 used in the attack. The police had been called to his home about 30 times in the past 7 years, according to an article published by George Petrus 8 days ago in USA Today. Because Florida doesn't require a license to purchase a gun, the shooter was able to do so with ease. When this risk was called into national attention, politicians spoke in support of relaxed gun legislation in the United States. Iowan Senator Joni Ernst was quoted in the Des Moines Register 1 week ago saying, quote, "The root cause is not that we have the Second Amendment, it is that we're not adequately addressing mental illness across the United States. Yet in nations where mental illnesses are just as common as they are in the United States, the number of mass shootings is much smaller." A study published in Volume 3, Issue 3 of Violence and Gender Journal in 2016 examined rates of mental illness and gun violence in the United States, England, and Australia. The study found that from 2000 to 2014, there was only one mass shooting in England, two in Australia, whereas America saw 133. As of 2013, the rates of depression were higher on average in Australia than in America. Rates of autism were differed by 0.1% between the three nations, and rates of schizophrenia differed by 0.1%. These three Western nations are alike in many ways, but they differ in one crucial one: their gun control laws. In Britain, military rifles are prohibited from civilian ownership. In Australia, an individual needs a license and a reason outside of personal protection to obtain a gun, and even then they cannot obtain an automatic or semi-automatic weapon. These two nations once had gun control laws comparable to that of the United States, but when these one or two shootings happened in these respective nations, that led to nationwide reform of their gun control laws, and violence using automatic and semi-automatic weapons has since decreased. In the wake of these tragedies, the public mourns and asks what they could have done to stop it from occurring. The general population fails to realize where the issue actually originates. Gun violence is precipitated by the NRA funding our politicians who directly control our gun legislation. Marco Rubio, a Floridian senator, earned over $3 million over the course of his legislative career from the National Rifle Association, an interest group exclusively the interest of making more gun owners in America, as Michael Hiltzik reported last week for the LA Times. The NRA spent $27 million funding the 50 senators who voted down a bill requiring universal background checks for gun purchases in December of 2015. Our current political climate and gun violence in our nation are tightly interwoven. It is crucial to learn where politicians are getting their funding from when they tweet their thoughts and prayers after lives are lost. Students in Parkland, Florida promise that this shooting will be the last one in American history. With the national focus shifting away from baseless demonization of the mentally ill population and towards the prevalence of NRA money in our politics, I believe that they'll be right.